In the plush first-class cabin from Atlanta to Los Angeles, 13-year-old Jeremiah Cole adjusts his crisp gray suit, exuding quiet pride in seat 2A. Flight attendant Sandra Holt sneers, "Lost your way, kid?" as giggles ripple through the passengers. She demands his ticket, expecting a fluke, but freezes when it checks out, linked to a VIP list. Her face pales as a phone trills, "Hello, White House speaking," then cuts off. Why does this moment unravel Jeremiah's future? Before we dive in, where are you watching from? If you stand for justice, hit like and subscribe for more gripping tales. Jeremiah Cole sat rigid in seat 2A, the plush leather of the first-class cabin doing little to ease the sting of Sandra Holt's mocking glare. Her bleach blonde ponytail bobbed as she leaned toward her co-worker, Tim Baxter, a wiry man with a perpetual smirk etched into his sunburned face. "No way that ticket's real," she hissed, her voice low but sharp enough to slice through the hum of pre-flight chatter. "Some black kid in a suit doesn't just waltz into first class alone." Tim's eyes flicked to Jeremiah, then back to Sandra, his lips curling into a grin that showed too many teeth. Around them, passengers settled into their seats, but the air thickened with their stares, some curious, others openly hostile. A woman in a red blazer 3 rows back muttered entitlement under her breath, loud enough for her husband to nod in agreement. Jeremiah's fingers tightened around the armrest, his knuckles paling against his dark skin, but his face stayed smooth as glass, a mask his mother had taught him to wear in moments like this. Sandra straightened, smoothing her navy uniform, with a theatrical flourish, and strode over to Jeremiah's seat. Her heels clicked against the floor, each step a drumbeat of authority she didn't deserve. "All right, sweetheart," she said, her tone dripping with syrupy condescension. "Let's see that boarding pass again. I'm sure there's been a mix-up. First class is for folks with, special tickets." She lingered on special, stretching it out like she was teaching a toddler a new word. Jeremiah met her gaze, his brown eyes steady, unflinching, a quiet dignity radiating from him that made her blink twice. "Yes, ma'am," he replied, his voice even as he reached into the pocket of his gray suit jacket. He pulled out the boarding pass, its edges crisp from careful handling, and handed it over. "Seat 2A. That's me." Sandra snatched it, her manicured nails flashing under the cabin lights as she turned it over, inspecting it like a detective hunting for flaws. The cabin grew quieter, passengers craning their necks to watch the showdown. A teenage girl in a hoodie snapped a photo with her phone, her whispered, "This is wild," floating across the aisle. Sandra's lips pursed as she studied the pass, her certainty wavering, but she wasn't ready to back down. Not yet. She thrust it back at Jeremiah, her smile tight. "Looks legit, I guess. But why's a kid like you up here all by yourself? No parents, no chaperone?" Her words hung heavy, laced with the unspoken assumption that he didn't belong, that his presence was some kind of glitch in the system. Jeremiah straightened his tie, the motion deliberate, buying him a second to swallow the fury bubbling in his chest. "I'm flying to Los Angeles for a tech summit," he said, keeping his tone measured. "I'm presenting a project on solar energy. My mom's joining me later. She had a call." Tim, lounging against the galley counter, let out a bark of laughter that cut through the murmurs. "A tech summit? What's next, kid? You gonna tell us you invented the internet?" He crossed his arms, his uniform sleeves riding up to reveal a faded tattoo of an eagle clutching a flag. The passengers chuckled, a low rumble of amusement that made Jeremiah's ears burn. He reached into his backpack, pulling out a sleek leather portfolio embossed with his initials JC, a gift from his mom for his 13th birthday 3 months ago. "Here's my work," he said, flipping it open to reveal neatly typed pages and hand-drawn diagrams of solar panels. Before he could finish, Tim lunged forward, snatching the portfolio from his hands with a flick of his wrist. "Let's see. This masterpiece," he sneered, then tossed it down the aisle like it was trash, pages fluttering as it skidded to a stop near the feet of a silver-haired woman in a tweed coat. Jeremiah's breath caught, his composure cracking for a split second as he watched his months of research scatter across the carpeted floor. He unbuckled his seatbelt and stood, moving to retrieve it, but the laughter swelled, a cruel chorus. That pinned him in place. "Looks like he's lost his homework," a balding man in a polo shirt chortled, elbowing his seatmate. Sandra crossed her arms, her smirk returning full force as she watched Jeremiah bend to gather the pages. His fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the effort to keep his anger caged. He smoothed out a crumpled sketch of a solar array, the lines smudged but still legible, and tucked it back into the portfolio. As he straightened, a shadow fell over him. The silver-haired woman, her coat smelling faintly of lavender, stepped into the aisle, her eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Enough," she snapped, her voice cutting through the noise like a whip. "You two ought to be ashamed, picking on a child for no reason but your own small minds." The cabin hushed, Sandra's smirk faltering as the woman's words landed. She handed Jeremiah his portfolio, her hands steady despite the slight shake of age. "I'm Dr. Lena Grayson," she said, softer now, her tone warming as she met his gaze. "Retired engineer. I've seen designs like yours change the world. Don't let these fools dim your light." Jeremiah nodded, clutching the portfolio to his chest, a flicker of relief washing over him. "Thank you, ma'am," he said, his voice low but firm. Dr. Grayson turned back to Sandra and Tim, her stare icy. "You've checked his ticket. He's paid for this seat same as anyone. Leave him be." The passengers shifted uncomfortably, a few nodding in reluctant agreement. Sandra's cheeks flushed pink, her authority punctured, and she muttered something about, "just doing my job," before retreating to the galley with Tim in tow. Jeremiah sank back into his seat, the leather creaking under him, his pulse slowing, as he dared to hope he'd won this round. The plane jolted as it began to taxi, the engine's roar drowning out the last whispers of the confrontation. Dr. Grayson settled into the seat across the aisle, pulling a worn paperback from her bag, but her eyes flicked to Jeremiah with a quiet pride that bolstered him. He opened his portfolio again, tracing the lines of his solar project, a plan to bring clean energy to neighborhoods like his in Atlanta, places where power bills crushed families every summer. For a moment he felt the weight lift, the victory, small but real. The crew had backed off, the passengers had seen him stand tall, and Dr. Grayson's words echoed in his mind. He was where he belonged, heading to a summit that could launch his dreams into reality. The plane lifted off, climbing into the Georgia sky, and Jeremiah allowed himself a faint smile, thinking the worst was behind him. But in the galley, Sandra's humiliation festered. She leaned close to Tim, her voice a venomous whisper over the clatter of coffee cups. "That kid thinks he's hot stuff, huh? Making me look like an idiot in front of everyone." Tim cracked his knuckles, his smirk twisting into something darker. "Don't worry, we'll fix him. He won't last the flight." Sandra's eyes narrowed, her mind racing for a way to reclaim her power. She grabbed the radio clipped to her belt, her thumb hovering over the button as she glanced at Jeremiah through the curtained gap. "Captain needs to know we've got a problem," she said, her voice low and cold. "Suspicious passenger in 2A. Might need security on the ground." Tim nodded, his grin widening as he pictured the chaos waiting at the gate. Let's see how smart he feels then. Jeremiah didn't hear them, didn't see the trap tightening around him. He flipped to a page in his portfolio, a graph projecting energy savings, and let himself imagine the summit stage, the applause, the chance to prove he was more than what they saw. Dr. Grayson caught his eye and gave a small nod, a silent promise of support. The plane leveled off at 30,000 feet, the seatbelt sign chiming off. And for a fleeting second, Jeremiah felt invincible. He'd faced their scorn and come out on top. But Sandra's voice crackled through the radio, reaching the cockpit. 200 feet ahead, her lie spinning a web he couldn't yet see. "Captain, we've got a situation. Passenger in 2A, Jeremiah Cole, acting erratic, possibly dangerous. Recommend ground intervention." The captain's reply was curt, trusting her word without question. "Copy that. I'll alert LAX security." Jeremiah adjusted his tie again, oblivious to the storm brewing beyond his control. The cabin lights dimmed for the long flight ahead, casting shadows that hid the malice in Sandra's eyes as she watched him from afar. His ticket was real, his place earned, but that wouldn't save him now. The summit, his dreams, his future, all teetered on the edge of a cliff he didn't know he was approaching. Sandra slipped the radio back onto her belt, her lips curling into a satisfied smile. She'd lost the first skirmish, but the war was hers to win. And Jeremiah, still basking in his fragile triumph, had no idea how deep the cut of this flight would go. The plane hummed steadily at cruising altitude, slicing through the night sky as Jeremiah Cole leaned back in seat 2A, his gray suit still pristine despite the earlier skirmish. The cabin lights cast a soft glow over the passengers, most now dozing or buried in their screens, the earlier drama fading into a dull buzz of indifference. Dr. Lena Grayson sat across the aisle, her tweed coat draped over her lap, her sharp eyes scanning the pages of her paperback. She'd handed Jeremiah a tissue from her purse after Sandra retreated, a small gesture that steadied him. He'd wiped the sweat from his palms, his pulse finally easing as he flipped open his leather portfolio again. The solar tech diagrams stared back at him, a lifeline to the Los Angeles summit that felt closer with every mile. Sandra and Tim's retreat to the galley had left him with a flicker of hope, a sense that he'd dodged their venom and come out stronger. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, breaking the calm. "Folks, this is Captain Reynolds. We've had a report of a minor issue up front. Nothing to worry about, just a procedural check. Flight attendants, please resume normal duties." The announcement was clipped, professional, and Jeremiah's shoulders relaxed further. He caught Dr. Grayson's eye, and she gave a slight nod, as if confirming the storm had passed. "Sounds like they've sorted it out," she murmured, her voice low enough to keep their conversation private. "You handled yourself well back there. Not many 13-year-olds could stare down that kind of nonsense and keep their cool." Jeremiah's lips twitched into a half-smile, the praise warming him. "My mom says staying calm is the best. Way to fight," he replied, smoothing a wrinkle from his tie. "She's right," Dr. Grayson said, closing her book. "I spent 40 years in engineering, breaking ceilings they didn't want me near. Calm's a weapon when they expect you to break." He nodded, emboldened, and pulled out a pen to jot a note on his project's margin, a tweak to his summit pitch inspired by her words. The plane felt like his domain now, the first-class seat a throne he'd defended. Sandra's humiliation, Tim's mocking toss of his portfolio, the passengers' snickers, all seemed distant, overshadowed by the captain's intervention. He pictured himself on that LA stage, lights blazing, judges leaning forward as he explained how solar grids could lift neighborhoods like his out of poverty. Dr. Grayson flipped her book open again, but her presence was a steady anchor, a shield against the lingering stares from a few seats back. For a moment, Jeremiah dared to believe he'd won, that the flight would carry him smoothly to his destiny. Then Tim emerged from the galley, a tray of coffee cups balanced in his hands, his smirk back in full force. He moved down the aisle, with exaggerated care, his eyes locked on Jeremiah as he approached. "Coffee, anyone?" he called, his voice loud enough to rouse a sleeping woman in 4C. Jeremiah glanced up, wary but focused on his notes, determined not to give Tim the reaction he craved. Tim stopped beside seat 2A, looming over him, the tray tilting slightly. "How about you, kid? Need a pick-me-up for all that big brain work?" The sarcasm was thick, and a few passengers chuckled, their earlier amusement reignited. Jeremiah shook his head, keeping his gaze on his portfolio. "No thanks," he said, his tone flat, refusing the bait. Tim's grin widened, a predator scenting weakness. "Suit yourself," he said. And then, with a flick of his wrist so quick it could have been an accident, he tipped the tray. A stream of scalding coffee splashed across Jeremiah's lap, soaking his gray suit and drenching the open portfolio in his hands. The heat seared through the fabric, burning his thighs, and he jolted upright with a sharp gasp, the portfolio slipping to the floor as he swiped at the mess. The cabin erupted in laughter, a wave of glee that crashed over him like a tide. "Whoops," Tim said, stepping back with mock surprise, his hands raised as if he hadn't meant it. "Guess I'm clumsy today." The balding man in the polo shirt guffawed, slapping his knee, while the woman in the red blazer smirked behind her magazine. Jeremiah's face burned, not just from the coffee but from the humiliation, his carefully built armor cracking under the weight of their eyes. Dr. Grayson was on her feet in an instant, her paperback hitting the floor as she snatched a handful of napkins from her bag. "You absolute cretin," she snapped at Tim, shoving the napkins into Jeremiah's hands. He pressed them against his soaked pants, the sting of the burn fading but the stain spreading, a dark blotch that ruined the suit he'd saved up for over months. His portfolio lay splayed on the carpet, pages curling as the coffee seeped into them, blurring the ink of his diagrams into muddy streaks. He knelt to gather it, his fingers shaking now, not from anger, but from the sinking realization that his summit prep was crumbling. "It's okay," Dr. Grayson said, kneeling beside him, her voice firm but kind. "We'll dry it out. You've got time." She shot a glare at Tim, who lingered nearby, his smirk unshaken. "That was no accident," she said, loud enough for the cabin to hear. "You're a disgrace to this uniform." The laughter faltered, a few passengers shifting uncomfortably as her words landed. Jeremiah scooped up the soggy pages, his chest tight, the smell of burnt coffee clinging to him like a curse. He straightened, clutching the ruined portfolio, and met Tim's gaze with a defiance that surprised even himself. "I'll still make it work," he said, his voice steady, despite the tremor in his hands. Tim shrugged, turning away with a casual swagger. But Sandra poked her head out from the galley, her eyes glinting with satisfaction as she watched the scene unfold. "Poor kid," she called, her tone mocking. "Guess you're not cut out for the high life after all." The word stung deeper than the coffee, a reminder that this wasn't over, that their hatred had teeth. Dr. Grayson guided Jeremiah back to his seat, her hand light on his shoulder. "Ignore them," she said, her voice a lifeline. "They're small people with smaller minds. You're bigger than this." He nodded, forcing a breath as he laid the portfolio across his lap, peeling apart the wet pages. The graph he'd been working on was a smear now, the numbers illegible, but he could rewrite it from memory. He had to. The summit was too close, his dreams too real to let this break him. The cabin settled, the laughter dying into murmurs, and for a fleeting second, he thought he'd salvaged the moment. Dr. Grayson pulled a pen from her coat, offering it with a conspiratorial wink. "Let's rebuild it," she said. "Show them what you're made of." But behind the galley curtain, Sandra's smirk hadn't faded. She leaned close to Tim, her voice a venomous hiss as she wiped coffee from the tray. "He's still sitting pretty, huh? Thinks he's untouchable now." Tim cracked his neck, his eyes narrowing as he watched Jeremiah scribble on a damp page. "Not for long," he muttered, his fingers drumming against the counter. "Captain's on our side. Ground crew's waiting. He'll wish he'd stayed. In coach." Sandra's lips curled, a predator savoring the hunt. "Good. Let's make sure he doesn't last." She glanced at the radio on her belt, the one she'd used to spin her lie, and her mind churned with the next move. The coffee was just a jab, a taste of what was coming. Jeremiah's false escape, his moment of triumph with Dr. Grayson, was a mirage, and the real blow was already in motion. Jeremiah didn't see it, didn't hear the malice brewing 20 feet away. He focused on his portfolio, rewriting the graph with Dr. Grayson's pen, his burned thighs throbbing under the wet fabric. The plane droned on, the altitude steady, but the air around him crackled with an unseen threat. He'd faced their scorn, their sabotage, and stood tall. But the victory was hollow. Sandra's radio call had reached Los Angeles. Security alerted to a disruptive passenger in 2A. The captain's intercom had been a lie, a pacifier for the cabin while the trap tightened. Jeremiah adjusted his tie, the damp fabric chafing his neck, and let himself believe he'd weathered the storm. Dr. Grayson's quiet support bolstered him, her presence a shield he clung to. But the shield was paper thin, and the next strike would shred it. Sandra slipped back into the galley, her smile a blade, and the flight stretched on, carrying Jeremiah toward a reckoning he couldn't yet imagine. The hum of the plane's engines filled the first-class cabin as Jeremiah Cole hunched over his damp portfolio in seat 2A, his gray suit still clinging wetly to his thighs from Tim's coffee assault. The sting of the burn had dulled to a faint ache, but the ruined pages of his solar tech project stared back at him, ink smeared into abstract swirls. He scribbled furiously with Dr. Lena Grayson's borrowed pen, reconstructing a graph of energy savings from memory. his jaw tight with determination. The cabin lights flickered slightly as the plane cut through a patch of turbulence, but the passengers around him had settled into a restless quiet, their earlier laughter replaced by the soft rustle of magazines and the clink of ice in glasses. Dr. Grayson sat across the aisle, her tweed coat folded neatly beside her, watching Jeremiah with a mix of pride and concern. She'd handed him a small pack of tissues from her purse, and he'd used them to blot the worst of the coffee from his notes, salvaging what he could. "I've got most of it back," Jeremiah said, his voice low but steady as he glanced at Dr. Grayson. "The summit's tomorrow. I can still make it work." She leaned forward, her wire-rimmed glasses catching the light. "You've got grit, kid," she replied, her tone warm but firm. "I've seen engineers twice your age fold under less. You're tougher than they think." Her words bolstered him, a lifeline amid the wreckage of his prep. He smoothed a damp page, tracing the outline of a solar panel he'd designed for Atlanta's poorest blocks, and let himself imagine the judges' faces when he presented it. The coffee spill, Sandra's sneers, Tim's sabotage, all felt like hurdles he'd cleared. He adjusted his tie, the damp fabric chafing his neck, and exhaled slowly, daring to believe he'd regained control. The lavatory door clicked open a few rows back, and Jeremiah glanced up instinctively. A burly man emerged, his broad shoulders stretching the seams of a tailored black blazer, his buzzed hair glinting under the lights. Victor Kane, a passenger from 5B, moved with the deliberate swagger of someone used to being feared. His pale, blue eyes scanned the cabin, landing on Jeremiah with a cold intensity that made the boy's stomach twist. Victor's thick neck bore a faint scar, a jagged line that hinted at a rough past, and his meaty hands flexed as he adjusted his cufflinks. He'd been silent during the earlier commotion, but now he loomed large, a new threat Jeremiah couldn't place. Sandra slipped out of the galley, her blonde ponytail swishing as she intercepted Victor near the curtain. She pressed a folded note into his hand, her lips moving in a quick, hushed whisper. Victor's mouth twitched into a sneer as he read, "It," his gaze flicking back to Jeremiah with a predator's focus. Jeremiah didn't see the exchange, his head bent over his portfolio as he rewrote a cost projection. Dr. Grayson's pen scratched against the paper, the numbers aligning in his mind like pieces of a puzzle he'd solved 100 times. The plane jolted again, a brief shudder that rattled the overhead bins, and he steadied the portfolio on his lap, refusing to let it slip. Dr. Grayson glanced out the window, her brow furrowing at the dark clouds beyond the glass, then turned back to him. "You ever think about engineering as a career?" she asked, her voice cutting through his focus. "You've got the mind for it." He nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Maybe. My mom says I should aim bigger than anyone expects." Dr. Grayson chuckled softly. "Smart woman. Keep surprising them." Victor's heavy footsteps thudded closer, stopping beside Jeremiah's seat. The air shifted, thick with a sudden menace that made Jeremiah's pen freeze mid-stroke. He looked up, meeting Victor's icy stare, the man's bulk blocking the aisle like a wall. "You're the kid causing all the fuss, huh?" Victor's voice was gravelly, laced with a southern drawl that carried an edge of contempt. His scarred neck flexed as he tilted his head, sizing Jeremiah up. "What's a boy like you doing in a seat like this? Steal that ticket off someone?" The accusation landed like a punch, and the cabin stirred, heads turning as passengers perked up for fresh drama. Jeremiah's heart thudded, but he kept his face calm, his mother's lessons echoing in his skull. "No, sir," he said, his tone even. "I earned it, heading to a tech summit in LA." He tapped his portfolio, the damp pages a silent witness to his fight. Victor snorted, a harsh sound that drew a snicker from the balding man in the polo shirt. "Tech summit? Sure, kid. Tell me another one." He leaned closer, his breath sour with whiskey, and jabbed a thick finger at Jeremiah's chest. "I've been a cop 20 years. I know a hustler when I see one. You don't belong up here." The words were a blade, cutting deeper than Tim's coffee spill, and Jeremiah's fingers tightened around the portfolio, his knuckles whitening. Dr. Grayson stood, her small frame bristling with fury. "Back off," she snapped, stepping into the aisle. "He's got every right to be here. You're the one out of line." Victor's sneer widened, unfazed. "Stay out of this, Grandma. This ain't your fight." Sandra hovered nearby, her arms crossed, a glint of triumph in her eyes as Victor took the lead. She'd slipped him the note, a scribbled lie about Jeremiah being trouble, knowing his ex-cop instincts would kick in. Tim lingered by the galley, watching with a grin as the trap sprang. Victor straightened, his voice booming now. "Crew, search his bag. I bet he's got something he shouldn't." Sandra pounced, snatching Jeremiah's backpack from under the seat before he could protest. She unzipped it, rifling through with exaggerated care, pulling out a notebook, a water bottle, a spare shirt. "Nothing yet," she said, her tone mocking, but her eyes flicked to Victor with a silent signal. Jeremiah's pulse raced, his calm fracturing as passengers whispered and pointed. "That's my stuff," he said, standing to grab the bag. But Victor shoved him back into the seat, his meaty hand heavy on Jeremiah's shoulder. "Sit down, thief," he growled. Sandra shook her head, feigning disappointment. "Clean so far. Maybe he's smarter than he looks." Then Victor moved, quick as a snake, slipping a pocket knife from his own blazer into the backpack's side pocket, while Sandra blocked the view. He stepped back, feigning shock. "Wait a sec, what's that?" He reached in, pulling out the knife with a dramatic flourish, its blade glinting under the cabin lights. "Well, damn," he roared. "Kid's armed. Captain needs to know about this." The cabin exploded into chaos, passengers gasping, the woman in the red blazer clutching her purse like Jeremiah might lunge at her. Dr. Grayson's face paled, but her voice cut through the noise. "That's a lie. I saw him plant it." She pointed at Victor, her finger trembling with rage, but the accusation drowned in the rising panic. Jeremiah's stomach dropped, his mind reeling as he stared at the knife, a cheap switchblade he'd never seen before. "That's not mine," he said, his voice rising despite his effort to stay steady. "He put it there." Victor laughed, a guttural sound that chilled the air. "Nice try, kid. Tell it to security." Sandra grabbed her radio, her voice urgent as she pressed the button. "Captain, we've got a weapon in 2A. Passengers dangerous. Requesting immediate action." Tim stepped forward, cracking his knuckles, ready to pounce if Jeremiah moved. The balding man in the polo shirt shouted, "Lock him up!" As others nodded, fear and prejudice feeding the frenzy. Dr. Grayson grabbed Jeremiah's arm, pulling him close. "Stay calm," she whispered, her eyes darting to Victor. "They're framing you. We'll fight this." But the captain's voice boomed over the intercom again, sharp and commanding. "Flight attendants, secure the situation. I'm coming back." Jeremiah's chest heaved, his burned thighs forgotten as terror clawed at him. The knife gleamed in Victor's hand, a false proof that turned his triumph to ash. Sandra's smirk was a victory lap, her plan with Victor snapping into place. The passengers' stares bore into him, a jury already convinced of his guilt. Dr. Grayson's grip tightened, her defiance a flicker of hope. But the trap had sprung, and Jeremiah was caught. The captain's footsteps echoed from the cockpit, heavy and inevitable, as the plane soared on, carrying him toward a reckoning he couldn't escape. Victor pocketed the knife, his sneer promising more pain, and Sandra leaned against the galley wall, savoring the chaos she'd unleashed. Jeremiah's summit, his dreams, his freedom, all hung by a thread, and the blade of this new lie was sharper than any he'd faced yet. The first-class cabin of the Atlanta to Los Angeles flight crackled with chaos as Victor Kane's accusation reverberated, the pocket knife gleaming in his scarred hand like a guillotine blade over Jeremiah Cole's future. Passengers gasped, their faces a mix of fear and judgment, while Sandra Holt stood smugly by the galley, her radio still warm from her call to the captain. Jeremiah sat frozen in seat 2A, his gray suit damp and stained, his leather portfolio clutched against his chest as if it could shield him from the lie spiraling out of control. "That's not mine," he repeated, his voice rising, cracking slightly under the weight of the moment. Dr. Lena Grayson gripped his arm, her tweed coat brushing his shoulder as she shouted over the din, "He planted it! I saw him!" Her words pierced the uproar, but Victor's gravelly laugh drowned them out. "Keep dreaming, lady," he sneered, tossing the knife onto the tray table with a clatter that silenced the cabin for a heartbeat. The balding man in the polo shirt leaped to his feet, pointing a trembling finger. "He's a threat! Get him off this plane!" The woman in the red blazer clutched her purse tighter, nodding furiously, while the teenage girl in the hoodie filmed it all, her phone trembling in her hands. Tim Baxter cracked his knuckles, stepping closer with a grin that promised violence, his sunburned face glowing with glee. Sandra's blonde ponytail swished as she folded her arms, her eyes glinting with triumph. She'd lit the match, and Victor had fanned the flames, turning a petty grudge into a full-blown crisis. Jeremiah's pulse hammered, his burned thighs throbbing beneath his soaked pants, but he locked eyes with Dr. Grayson, drawing strength from her fierce resolve. "We'll prove it," she whispered, her glasses fogging slightly with the heat of her anger. "Stay with me." The captain's footsteps thudded down the aisle, a tall figure in a crisp navy uniform cutting through the crowd like a storm, rolling in. Captain Reynolds, his jaw set and his gray eyes hard, stopped beside Jeremiah's seat, his presence sucking the air from the cabin. "What's going on here?" he barked, his voice a whip that snapped everyone to attention. Victor straightened, his ex-cop swagger oozing as he held up the knife. "Caught this kid with a weapon, sir. He's been trouble since takeoff," threatened the crew. Sandra nodded eagerly, stepping forward. "He's erratic, Captain. I radioed you about him earlier. We can't risk it." Tim loomed behind her, adding, "Spilled coffee on purpose, too. He's unhinged." The lies piled up, a wall of deceit, closing in around Jeremiah. Dr. Grayson surged to her feet, her small frame trembling with fury. "That's a fabrication. This man," she jabbed a finger at Victor, "slipped that knife into his bag. I witnessed it. They've been harassing him since he boarded, all because he's young and black and dared to sit here." Her voice shook but held firm, a beacon in the storm. Captain Reynolds' eyes narrowed, flicking between Victor's sneer, Sandra's smugness, and Jeremiah's wide-eyed silence. "Is that true, son?" he asked, his tone softening just enough to give Jeremiah a sliver of hope. "No, sir," Jeremiah said, forcing his voice steady. "I'm going to a tech summit. That knife's not mine. They're lying." He lifted his portfolio, the damp pages trembling in his hands, a mute testament to his truth. The captain rubbed his chin, his gaze shifting to the knife, then back to Victor. "You're sure you found this on him?" Victor nodded, his scarred neck flexing. "Dead sure. He's a danger." But Dr. Grayson wasn't done. "Check his bag again," she demanded. "Search him properly. You'll see he's clean." The cabin held its breath as Captain Reynolds hesitated, the weight of the moment teetering. Then the teenage girl in the hoodie piped up, her voice shaky but clear. "I've got video. He didn't have that knife before this guy messed with his bag." She held up her phone, the screen glowing with shaky footage of Victor's sleight of hand, the knife slipping into the backpack as Sandra distracted the crowd. A murmur rippled through the passengers, shock replacing their earlier scorn. The woman in the red blazer lowered her purse, her face paling, while the balding man sank back into his seat, muttering under his breath. Captain Reynolds took the phone, his brow furrowing as he watched the clip, the grainy images undeniable. He handed it back, his jaw tightening as he turned to Victor. "You're coming with me," he said, his voice cold steel. "Back to your seat, now." Victor's sneer faltered, his hands balling into fists, but he shuffled back to 5B under the captain's glare, the knife confiscated and slipped into a plastic bag. Sandra's face flushed red, her triumph crumbling, and Tim slunk back to the galley, his grin wiped clean. The captain faced Jeremiah, his expression softening. "I'm sorry about this, son. You're clear. Stay put and enjoy the flight." He shot a warning look at Sandra. "No more nonsense from the crew. Understood?" She nodded stiffly, her lips a thin line, and retreated with Tim as the captain returned to the cockpit. Dr. Grayson sank into her seat, exhaling sharply. "That was too close," she said, patting Jeremiah's shoulder. "You okay?" He nodded, his chest heaving as relief flooded him, the adrenaline draining away. "Yeah, thanks to you and that girl." He glanced at the teenager who gave a shy thumbs up before burying her face in her hoodie. The cabin settled, passengers whispering apologies or avoiding his gaze, and Jeremiah let himself breathe, thinking he'd escaped the jaws of disaster. His portfolio lay across his lap, the damp pages a reminder of the fight, but he flipped it open, rewriting a smeared line with Dr. Grayson's pen. The summit felt within reach again, his dreams intact despite the chaos. Dr. Grayson pulled a granola bar from her bag, splitting it with him. "Fuel up," she said with a wry smile. "You've earned it." He took a bite, the sweetness grounding him, and for a moment, the plane felt safe, the turbulence outside a distant rumble. He'd faced the crew's malice, Victor's frame-up, and come out on top, his dignity unbroken. The passengers' stares softened, some nodding in quiet respect, and Jeremiah dared to hope the worst was behind him. But in the galley, Sandra's rage simmered, her hands trembling as she stacked cups with a clatter. "He's still sitting there like he owns the place," she hissed to Tim, her voice a venomous whisper. "Captain bought that sob story, but I'm not done." Tim leaned against the counter, his eyes dark with spite. "Neither am I. Ground crew's still on alert, right?" Sandra nodded, her smirk returning like a shadow creeping back. "Oh yeah, I radioed security before the captain showed up. Told them he threatened me with that knife after the coffee spill. They're waiting at LAX with cuffs." Tim chuckled, a low, ugly sound. "Good. Let's see him talk his way out of that." She grabbed the radio again, her thumb pressing the button with relish. "LAX security, this is Flight 217. Update on 2A Jeremiah Cole. Confirmed threat with a weapon. He's agitated, possibly violent. Recommend full detainment on arrival." The crackled response was swift. "Copy that. Officers standing by." Sandra slipped the radio back onto her belt, her eyes glinting as she peeked through the curtain at Jeremiah, oblivious in his seat. He scribbled another note, his burned thighs forgotten, his focus on the summit stage he could almost see. Dr. Grayson offered him a sip of her water, her presence a steady comfort, and he took it, grateful for the ally he'd found. The plane descended, the lights of Los Angeles twinkling below like a promise, but the promise was a lie. Sandra's call had sealed Jeremiah's fate, her revenge sharper than Victor's knife. The captain's apology, the passenger's shift, Dr. Grayson's defense all meant nothing against the machinery of her malice. The seatbelt sign chimed on, and Jeremiah buckled up, his heart lighter than it had been since takeoff. He'd survived the cabin's wrath, proven his place, but the real trap waited on the tarmac, armed and ready. Sandra smoothed her uniform, her smile a blade honed for the kill, and Tim cracked his neck, savoring the chaos to come. Jeremiah adjusted his tie, the damp fabric a badge of his resilience, and braced for landing, unaware that his freedom was slipping through his fingers. With every foot the plane dropped. "Hey folks, what do you think? Comment number 1 if you're furious at Sandra and Tim for framing Jeremiah, or number 2 if you think Victor's the real monster here. Hit that like button if you're rooting for Jeremiah, to fight back, and subscribe to catch how he faces this next blow. Can an innocent kid outsmart a system stacked against him? How far will these bigots go to crush his dreams? What's waiting for him when those wheels hit the ground?" The plane's wheels screeched against the Los Angeles tarmac, a jolt that snapped Jeremiah Cole upright in seat 2A, his gray suit still damp and coffee-stained from Tim's earlier sabotage. The cabin lights brightened as the seatbelt sign blinked off, passengers unbuckling with the rustle of relief after a tense flight. Jeremiah's hands trembled slightly as he gathered his leather portfolio, the pages crinkled but salvaged, his solar tech project clinging to life despite the chaos. Dr. Lena Grayson stood beside him, her tweed coat slung over her arm, her sharp eyes scanning the aisle. "You made it through," she said, her voice steady with a hint of pride. "That was a hell of a fight up there." Jeremiah nodded, his throat tight, the weight of the captain's apology and Victor's retreat still settling in his chest. "Couldn't have done it without you," he replied, slinging his backpack over his shoulder, the memory of the planted knife flashing in his mind. The jet bridge loomed ahead as they shuffled toward the exit, the air thick with the stale scent of recycled oxygen and lingering tension. Sandra Holt stood by the galley, her blonde ponytail taut. her smirk replaced by a stiff professionalism, as she nodded farewell to passengers. Tim Baxter lingered behind her, his sunburned face blank, but his eyes followed Jeremiah with a glint that promised unfinished business. Victor Kane, relegated to 5B, hulked silently as he grabbed his carry-on, his scarred neck flexing with suppressed rage. Jeremiah kept his gaze forward, Dr. Grayson's presence a shield at his side, her small frame radiating a quiet defiance that bolstered him. The captain's intervention, the teenage girl's video, had turned the tide mid-flight, and he stepped onto the jet bridge with a flicker of triumph, the LA Tech Summit within reach. But the tunnel opened into a nightmare. 4 uniformed officers waited at the gate, their black vests stark against the terminal's fluorescent glare, hands resting on holsters as their eyes locked onto Jeremiah. "Jeremiah Cole?" The lead cop barked, a stocky man with a buzz cut and a jaw like concrete. His voice cut through the crowd, freezing Jeremiah mid-step. Dr. Grayson's hand tightened on his arm, her breath catching. "Yes, sir," Jeremiah said, his voice steady despite the sudden lurch in his stomach. The cop stepped forward, his boots thudding on the tile, and yanked a pair of handcuffs from his belt. "You're under detainment. Step aside, hands behind your back." The words hit like a fist, and before Jeremiah could blink, cold metal snapped around his wrists, the cuffs biting into his skin. "What's this about?" Dr. Grayson demanded, shoving past a gawking passenger to face the cop. "He's done. Nothing wrong." The officer ignored her, shoving Jeremiah toward a wall as the other 3 formed a semicircle, their faces hard with suspicion. Passengers streamed by, some whispering, others pulling out phones to film, a growing crowd buzzing with curiosity. Sandra emerged from the jet bridge, her uniform crisp, her lips twitching into a faint smirk as she leaned against a pillar, watching the scene unfold. "He threatened me with a knife mid-flight," she called, her voice loud enough to carry. "Captain cleared him, but I felt unsafe. He's dangerous." The lie was smooth, rehearsed, and the cops nodded, accepting it without question. Jeremiah's heart pounded, his burned thighs throbbing as he twisted against the cuffs. "That's not true. She's lying again," he shouted, his calm fracturing under the weight of the betrayal. Dr. Grayson spun on Sandra, her glasses glinting with fury. "You framed him up there and now this? You're disgusting." The lead cop raised a hand, silencing her. "Ma'am, step back or you're next." His tone was a warning, and Dr. Grayson's jaw clenched, but she obeyed, her eyes darting to her purse where her phone nestled. The crowd swelled, phones flashing, voices murmuring troublemaker, and worse, the racial slurs sharp and jagged in the air. Jeremiah's chest heaved, his portfolio slipping from his grasp to the floor, pages scattering like fallen leaves. The teenage girl from the flight pushed through, her hoodie askew, holding up her phone. "I've got proof he's innocent," she yelled, but a second cop snatched it from her hand, pocketing it with a grunt. "Evidence," he muttered, shoving her back. Jeremiah's hope flickered, the video that saved him midair now buried in a cop's pocket. Dr. Grayson pulled her own phone, her fingers flying as she dialed a number. "I'm calling a lawyer," she snapped, stepping away as the line rang. "This is illegal detainment." The lead cop smirked, hauling Jeremiah toward a side corridor, his grip bruising. "Tell it to the judge, kid," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. The terminal blurred past, a maze of glass and steel, as the cops dragged Jeremiah to a small holding room, its walls gray and scuffed. They shoved him into a metal chair, the cuffs clanking as he sat, his suit rumpled and his dignity shredded. Outside, Dr. Grayson's voice echoed faintly, arguing with someone on the phone, her words a lifeline he couldn't reach. The lead cop loomed over him, cracking his knuckles. "Threatening a flight attendant's a felony, boy. You're in, deep." Jeremiah shook his head, his throat dry. "I didn't do it. There's video. Check it." The cop laughed, a harsh bark. "Yeah, we'll get to that. Eventually." The door slammed shut, leaving him alone, the hum of the airport muffled through the walls. Minutes stretched into an hour, the clock above ticking with agonizing slowness. Jeremiah's mind raced, replaying Sandra's smirk, Victor's knife, Tim's coffee spill, the passengers' jeers. He'd fought them all, won mid-flight, only to crash here, cuffed and cornered. His summit dreams faded, the stage slipping away as the cuffs cut into his wrists. Then the door creaked open, and Dr. Grayson stormed in, a wiry man in a cheap suit trailing her, his briefcase battered but his eyes sharp. "Lena called me," he said, adjusting his tie. "I'm Carl Ruiz, attorney. We're getting you out." The lead cop followed, scowling, but he unlocked the cuffs, his movements grudging. "Paperwork's a mess," he muttered. "You're free, for now." Jeremiah rubbed his wrists, the red marks stark against his skin, and stood, his legs shaky but his resolve hardening. Dr. Grayson handed him his portfolio, gathered from the terminal floor, and squeezed his shoulder. "We've got the video from that girl," she said. "Carl's filing a complaint against the crew and security. This isn't over." He nodded, relief washing through him, the weight lifting as they stepped back into the terminal. The crowd had thinned, the cops retreating with sour glares, and Sandra was gone. Her shift ended or her nerve faltered. Jeremiah exhaled, thinking he'd dodged the bullet, his summit still possible with Dr. Grayson and Carl at his side. But outside, Victor Kane leaned against a rental car in the pickup lane, his black blazer wrinkled, his phone pressed to his ear. "Yeah, it's me," he growled, his scarred neck flexing as he spoke. "Kid's out. Crew botched it, but I'm not done. Post his name, his face. Call him a thug, a scammer, whatever sticks, make it viral." The voice on the other end crackled, eager. "Got it. Far-right blogs live in 10 minutes. He'll be toast." Victor hung up, his sneer twisting as he watched Jeremiah and Dr. Grayson hail a cab, oblivious to the storm brewing online. The post hit as their taxi pulled away, a screaming headline: "First-class fraud. Black teen terrorizes flight," spreading like wildfire across social media, racking up thousands of shares in minutes. Jeremiah settled into the cab, his portfolio on his lap, Dr. Grayson beside him plotting legal moves with Carl on speakerphone. "We'll sue the airline," she said, her voice fierce. "This stops here." He nodded, his burned thighs forgotten, his focus shifting to the hotel, the summit, a chance to rebuild. The city lights blurred past, LA sprawling and indifferent, and he let himself believe he'd escaped again. The ground assault a battle won. But his phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Check the news, kid. You're finished." He opened it, his breath catching as the blog post loaded, his face plastered beside lies that shredded his name. Dr. Grayson's phone rang seconds later, the summit organizers on the line, their voices tense. "Jeremiah, we've seen the reports. We need to talk. Your attendance is in question." His heart sank, the victory in the terminal turning to dust. Victor's revenge had struck, a blow far deadlier than cuffs or knives, and the summit slipped from his grasp. Dr. Grayson grabbed his hand, her grip fierce, but the cab rolled on, carrying him into a war he hadn't seen coming, the internet a battlefield he couldn't fight alone. The Los Angeles hotel room glowed with the soft amber of a desk lamp as Jeremiah Cole sat hunched over his leather portfolio, the pages still crinkled from the flight's chaos, but painstakingly restored. His gray suit hung in the closet, damp and stained, replaced by a fresh black one he'd packed as a backup, its sleeves a touch long but fitting his resolve. Dr. Lena Grayson perched on the edge of the bed, her tweed coat folded beside her, her sharp eyes scanning a legal pad where she'd scribbled notes from her call with Carl Ruiz, the lawyer who'd sprung Jeremiah from LAX's holding room. The clock on the nightstand blinked 11:47 p.m., the city's hum seeping through the window as Jeremiah traced a solar tech diagram with a pencil, his burned thighs a dull ache beneath his sweatpants. "We've got the video," Dr. Grayson said, tapping her pen against the pad. "That girl's footage clears you. Carl's filing against the airline tomorrow. Sandra and Victor won't get away with this." Jeremiah nodded, his jaw tight, the summit looming just hours away. "I just need to focus on the presentation," he said, his voice steady despite the exhaustion tugging at him. "Get through tomorrow, then deal with the rest." His phone sat silent beside him, the viral blog post from Victor Kane. First-class fraud, black teen terrorizes flight, still racking up hateful shares online, a storm he'd muted by turning off notifications. Dr. Grayson leaned forward, her glasses slipping slightly. "You're tougher than steel, kid. After that flight, most would have cracked. You're still standing." He managed a faint smile, her words a lifeline as he flipped to a page of cost projections, rewriting a smudged figure from memory. The LA Tech Summit was his shot, a stage to prove his solar project could light up forgotten neighborhoods, and he wouldn't let Victor's lies steal it. The morning sun blazed through the hotel curtains, rousing Jeremiah at 6 sharp. He showered, the hot water easing the stiffness in his wrists where the cuffs had bitten, and dressed in the black suit, adjusting the tie with care. Dr. Grayson met him in the lobby, her coat swapped for a crisp blazer, her presence a steady anchor as they cabbed to the summit venue, a sleek convention center downtown. The air buzzed with nervous energy as finalists milled about, their projects on display. But Jeremiah's chest tightened as he caught whispers. "Isn't that the kid from the flight?" And sidelong glances from staff. He clutched his portfolio. It's leather-worn but solid, and followed Dr. Grayson to the registration desk, where a harried woman handed him a badge with his name in bold. Jeremiah Cole, Solar Equity Initiative. "You're in the main hall, 3rd slot," she said, her tone clipped, her eyes flickering with recognition. The auditorium thrummed with anticipation, rows of seats filling with judges, tech execs, and students, the stage framed by massive screens. Jeremiah settled into a front-row seat beside Dr. Grayson, his nerves electric as the first 2 presenters dazzled, a girl with a drone-based pollution tracker, then a boy pitching AI for urban farming. His turn came fast, the MC calling, "Next up, Jeremiah Cole." He strode to the podium, his black suit sharp under the lights, his portfolio open to his opening slide. The judges, a mix of stern faces and curious gazes, leaned forward as he began. "My project brings solar power to underserved communities," he said, his voice clear, ringing with a passion honed by months of work. "It's not just energy, it's equity, jobs, a future." He clicked to a graph, the numbers crisp despite the flight's ruin, showing how panels could cut bills in half for families like his in Atlanta. The room hung on his words, the screens flashing images of cracked streets and rusted rooftops transformed by his vision. A judge scribbled notes, another nodded, and Jeremiah's confidence surged, his burned thighs forgotten as he detailed implementation, community training, scalable grids, triple bottom line returns. The clock ticked down his 10 minutes, but he nailed every point, ending with, "This isn't charity, it's justice, built from the ground up." Applause erupted, sharp and genuine, and Dr. Grayson beamed from her seat, her pride palpable. The judges' questions came fast, cost feasibility, scalability, and he answered with precision, his mind a steel trap honed by adversity. "You've got something special here," a gray-haired judge said, her tone warm. "We're close to naming finalists. Stay put." Jeremiah returned to his seat, his heart pounding with hope. The summit his triumph after the flight's hell. Dr. Grayson squeezed his arm. "You crushed it," she whispered. "They're eating out of your hand." He exhaled, daring to believe he'd won. The viral hate a distant echo drowned by the room's energy. The judges huddled, their murmurs a low hum, and he pictured the finalist announcement, his name in lights, his project funded. The stage was his, the fight worth it, until the auditorium doors slammed open with a bang that silenced the crowd. Victor Kane stormed in, his black blazer wrinkled, his scarred neck red with fury. "That kid's a fraud," he bellowed, his voice a shotgun blast as he pointed at Jeremiah. "He attacked me on that flight, nearly stabbed me." Gasps rippled through the room, heads swiveling as Victor shoved a phone at a security guard, a video playing loud, a grainy clip of Jeremiah, lunging, the coffee spill edited to look like a violent swing. The crowd erupted, whispers turning to shouts, and the judges froze, their faces hardening. Jeremiah's stomach dropped, his triumph shattering as Dr. Grayson stood, her voice cutting through. "That's fake. We've got proof it's doctored." But the guard waved her off, ushering Victor forward as the MC scrambled to the mic. "Please, everyone, calm down. We'll address this." The judges reconvened, their deliberation tense, as Victor loomed by the stage, his sneer a dagger in Jeremiah's chest. "He's a thug," Victor yelled, playing to the crowd. "Check the news. He's dangerous." The viral blog post flashed on a spectator's tablet. The lie's now a weapon in Victor's hands. Jeremiah's hands shook, his portfolio slipping to the floor, pages fluttering as he stood. "That's not what happened," he said, his voice breaking through the chaos. "He framed me." But the room was a storm, doubt poisoning the air, and the judge's whispers grew sharp. Security flanked Jeremiah, their hands hovering near his arms, and Dr. Grayson grabbed her phone, dialing Carl. "We need that video now," she hissed, her glasses fogging with urgency. The head judge, a stern woman with a silver bun, took the stage, her voice clipped. "Due to this disturbance and credible allegations, Jeremiah Cole is removed from consideration pending investigation. Security, escort him out." The words landed like a sledgehammer, and Jeremiah's knees buckled, his black suit a shroud as guards gripped his shoulders. "No!" Dr. Grayson shouted, shoving past a guard. "This is sabotage. You're ruining an innocent kid." But the judge shook her head, unmoved, and the guards hauled Jeremiah toward the exit, his portfolio left scattered on the floor. The crowd parted, some jeering, others silent, as Victor watched, his scarred face alight with victory. "Told you, kid," he muttered, low enough for only Jeremiah to hear. "You don't belong." The double doors slammed shut behind him. The auditorium's roar muffled as Jeremiah stood in the lobby, his breath ragged, his summit dreams ashes at his feet. Dr. Grayson burst through seconds later, her blazer askew, her phone pressed to her ear. "Carl's got the real footage," she said, her voice fierce. "We'll fight this. You're not done." Jeremiah nodded, his chest hollow, the sting of expulsion worse than the flight's cuffs. He'd dazzled them, won them over, only to be torn down by Victor's lie, a blow sharper than any before. The convention center loomed, its glass walls, reflecting a city that didn't care, and he picked up a crumpled page from his portfolio, a solar panel sketch smudged but defiant. Outside, Victor slipped into a side alley, his phone buzzing with a text. "Video's live. Summit's toast." "Next move?" he grinned, typing back. "Keep pushing, ruin him." The doctored clip spread, the blog's reach doubling, and Jeremiah's name became a lightning rod for hate. Dr. Grayson tucked her legal pad under her arm, her eyes blazing as she guided Jeremiah to a bench. "We're not stopping," she said, her voice a vow. "They'll pay." But the summit was gone, his win stolen, and the war had only begun. Victor's shadow stretching far beyond the flight, a predator unleashed on a boy who dared to rise. Jeremiah Cole sat on a hard lobby bench outside the LA Tech Summit auditorium, his black suit wrinkled, his leather portfolio a crumpled heap beside him. The convention center's glass walls reflected the midday sun, casting harsh light across, his face still taut with the sting of expulsion. Dr. Lena Grayson paced nearby, her blazer sleeves rolled up, her phone pressed to her ear as she barked at Carl Ruiz, the lawyer on the other end. "We've got the real video, Carl," she snapped, her voice echoing off the tile. "That doctored trash Victor showed is a lie. Get it to the summit board now." Jeremiah's hands rested on his knees, the red marks from the LAX cuffs faded, but the ache in his chest fresh, Victor Kane's sabotage a blade that kept cutting. The summit's roar faded behind the closed doors, his solar tech dream shredded by a fake video, and a room full of doubt. Footsteps clicked sharply against the floor, and Jeremiah looked up as a woman strode toward him, her presence parting the lingering crowd like a ship through waves. Nadia Cole, his mother, stood 41 years old and unyielding, her navy pantsuit tailored to her slim frame, her coiled hair swept into a high bun that framed her fierce brown eyes. She carried a leather satchel, its strap worn from years of battles, and her heels struck the ground with a rhythm that promised reckoning. "Jeremiah," she said, her voice firm but warm as she reached him, her hand finding his shoulder. "I got here as fast as I could. What happened?" Her gaze flicked to Dr. Grayson, then back to her son, reading the exhaustion in his slumped posture. "They kicked me out," Jeremiah said, his throat tight, the words bitter on his tongue. "Victor showed a fake video, said I attacked him on the flight. The judges bought it." Nadia's eyes narrowed, a storm brewing behind them as Dr. Grayson hung up and stepped forward. Nadia Cole? I'm Lena Grayson. I was with him on the plane. The crew in this Victor Kane framed him from takeoff. We've got proof, but the summit board spooked. Nadia nodded, her jaw tightening. As she absorbed the story, the coffee spill, the planted knife, the viral blog, the summit crash. I've seen the online garbage, she said, her voice low. I'm EPA Deputy Advisor. I deal with liars every day. This ends now. She dropped her satchel on the bench, pulling out a tablet and tapping with swift precision, her nails clicking against the screen. I've got contacts on the summit board, she said, her tone clipped. They'll hear me out. Dr. Grayson handed over her phone. The teenage girl's footage loaded and ready, showing Victor slipping the knife into Jeremiah's bag mid-flight. Nadia watched it, her lips pressing into a thin line, then dialed a number, her voice shifting to a steely calm. Dr. Patel, it's Nadia Cole. My son's been wrongfully ejected from your summit based on a falsified video. I'm sending you evidence that proves it. Reinstate him, or this goes public with legal action attached. Her words were a blade, sharp and unyielding, and within minutes, the auditorium doors swung open, a flustered board member beckoning them back. Jeremiah followed Nadia and Dr. Grayson inside, his black suit a quiet defiance as they faced the judges. Nadia took the stage, her tablet projecting the real footage, the grainy truth of Victor's setup playing for the stunned crowd. This is the reality, she said, her voice ringing out. My son was targeted by a racist ex-cop and a complicit flight crew. Your decision was based on a lie. The judges murmured, the gray-haired woman who'd expelled Jeremiah shifting uncomfortably as Nadia laid out the timeline. Sandra's malice, Tim's sabotage, Victor's escalation. Dr. Grayson stepped up, her legal pad in hand. We've filed against the airline and Kane. This video clears Jeremiah. He deserves his spot. The room held its breath, the crowd's earlier jeers replaced by a tense silence, and the head judge rose, her silver bun glinting under the lights. We've reviewed the evidence. Jeremiah Cole is reinstated as a finalist. Mr. Kane is barred from the premises. Applause broke out, tentative at first, then swelling as Jeremiah stood, his chest heaving with relief. Victor, lurking by the exit, snarled, his scarred neck flushing red as security hauled him out, his shouts of, "This ain't over," echoing down the hall. Nadia squeezed Jeremiah's shoulder, her pride a quiet fire in her eyes, and Dr. Grayson grinned, her glasses fogging with the room's heat. You're back, kid, she said, clapping his back. Show them what you've got. The judges resumed deliberations, and Jeremiah reclaimed his portfolio, its pages battered but alive, his solar project poised for the win. He sat with Nadia and Dr. Grayson, the summit his again, the stage a promise renewed. The celebration was cut short as Nadia's phone rang, its shrill tone slicing through the hum of victory. She stepped aside, her expression shifting to professional steel as she answered. Hello, White House speaking, the voice crackled, and Jeremiah's ears perked up, his mother's EPA role suddenly stark in the room's glare. Nadia, it's Secretary Evans, the caller said, audible to those nearby. Heard about your boy's ordeal. He's got guts. We're watching his summit run closely. Nadia smiled faintly, her voice smooth. Thank you, sir. He's a fighter. Learned it from the best. She hung up, turning to Jeremiah with a nod. They're impressed up top. Keep shining. He grinned, the White House not a jolt of fuel, his reinstatement cemented by power beyond the summit's walls. But as Nadia slipped her phone into her satchel, a shadow fell over their triumph. Victor Kane, ejected but unbroken, stood outside in the alley, his phone buzzing with a new message. Blogs at 50,000 hits. Kids trending. Next step? He typed back, his scarred fingers trembling with rage. Hack the summit site. Post his face. Tag it with a bounty. Make him a target. Within minutes, the convention center's website crashed, replaced by a glaring image of Jeremiah's summit badge photo captioned, Wanted, Disruptive Thug, $5,000 for justice. Threats flooded in. Texts, emails, voicemails, each uglier than the last, slurs and death promises piling up like storm clouds. The summit board's phone rang off the hook, panicked staff pulling Jeremiah's file as the hate surged. Nadia's phone buzzed again, this time with a summit organizer's voice tight with fear. "Ms. Cole, we've got a security breach. Your son's image is everywhere online with a bounty. We can't guarantee his safety here." Her face hardened, her hand gripping Jeremiah's arm as she listened. "He's a finalist," she snapped. "You're not kicking him out again." But the organizer's tone was final. "It's too volatile. We're pulling him for his own protection. We'll review his project remotely, but he can't stay." The call ended, and Nadia's eyes met Jeremiah's, her resolve cracking just enough for him to see the worry beneath. "They're forcing me out?" he asked, his voice hollow. The victory snatched away again. Dr. Grayson slammed her legal pad on the bench, her voice a growl. "This is Victor's doing. He's turned it into a war." Jeremiah stood, his black suit a shroud of defiance, his portfolio trembling in his hands. "I was so close," he said, the words a whisper as the auditorium emptied, his moment stolen by a hacker's keystrokes. Nadia pulled him close, her satchel slung over her shoulder, her voice fierce. "We're not done fighting. They'll regret this." But the threats kept coming, a deluge of hate that drowned his reinstatement, and the summit faded into a memory as security ushered them out. The convention center a battlefield he'd lost. The cab ride to the hotel was silent, Jeremiah staring. Out at LA's neon sprawl, his burned thighs a dull reminder of the flight that started it all. Nadia typed furiously on her tablet, emailing Carl and her EPA team, her mind racing for a counterstrike. Dr. Grayson sat beside them, her glasses fogged with frustration, her legal pad scribbled with plans. "We'll sue Victor into the ground," she muttered. "He's gone too far." Jeremiah nodded, his chest tight, the White House praise a bitter echo against the bounty on his head. He'd dazzled the judges, reclaimed his place, only to be yanked out by Victor's ruthless hand, the war exploding beyond the summit into something darker, deadlier. A fight he couldn't escape. The Los Angeles evening draped the city in a haze of orange and smog as Jeremiah Cole slumped in the back of a taxi, his black suit wrinkled from the summit's collapse, his leather portfolio a lifeline clutched against his chest. Nadia Cole sat beside him, her navy pantsuit crisp despite the day's war, her coiled hair catching the fading light as she typed furiously on her tablet, emailing her EPA team for leverage against the mounting threats. Dr. Lena Grayson occupied the other side, her blazer sleeves rolled up, her legal pad scribbled with plans to sue Victor Kane into oblivion. The cab's tires hummed against the asphalt, weaving through downtown traffic toward their hotel, a sanctuary after the summit board's forced withdrawal. Jeremiah's phone buzzed relentlessly in his pocket, muted, but alive with hate. Victor's hacked bounty post, wanted disruptive thug, $5,000 for justice, now a viral plague, its slurs and death threats flooding in like a tide he couldn't stem. Nadia glanced at him, her fierce brown eyes softening for a moment. "We'll fix this," she said, her voice a steel promise. "Carl's building the case. Victor's done." Jeremiah nodded, his throat tight, the sting of the summit's loss sharper than the cuffs at LAX. "I was so close," he murmured, his burned thighs aching beneath his pants, a reminder of the flight that sparked this nightmare. Dr. Grayson tucked her pad into her bag, her glasses glinting with resolve. "He's a coward hiding behind a screen," she said. "We'll bury him." The cab turned onto a quieter street, palm trees casting long shadows, and Jeremiah let himself breathe, the hotel's promise of safety, a faint light in the dark. Paparazzi had swarmed the summit exit, their flashes chasing the White House connection. But here, the city felt distant. The war momentarily paused. Then headlights flared behind them, a pickup truck roaring out of an alley, its engine a guttural snarl that shattered the calm. The cab driver cursed, swerving as the truck cut them off, its rusted bumper screeching against the taxi's side. 3 masked men leaped from the bed, their boots slamming the pavement, their silhouettes hulking in the dusk. "Get down!" Nadia shouted, shoving Jeremiah to the floor as the first man smashed a bat against the rear window, glass exploding, inward in a shower of shards. Jeremiah's heart slammed against his ribs, his portfolio tumbling as he ducked, glass raining onto his back. Dr. Grayson yelped, shielding her face, while Nadia kicked the door open, her satchel clutched like a weapon. The men charged, their masks black ski gear, their voices muffled but venomous. "Found you, thug," one bellowed, his bat swinging at Nadia as she rolled out, dodging the blow by inches. "Teach him his place," another roared, lunging for Jeremiah through the shattered window, his gloved hand grabbing for his collar. Jeremiah twisted, his suit tearing as he shoved back, adrenaline flooding him. "Get off me," he yelled, his voice raw, his fists flailing against the man's grip. Nadia sprang up, pulling a taser from her satchel, a sleek device she'd carried since DC protests, and fired, the prongs hitting the bat wielder square in the chest. He convulsed, dropping with a thud, his mask askew to reveal a scruffy beard and wild eyes. The second man tackled her, pinning her arm, but she kneed him hard, her training kicking in as he grunted and staggered back. Dr. Grayson scrambled out, her small frame dodging a third attacker's fist, and grabbed a shard of glass, brandishing it like a dagger. "Back off," she snarled, her voice a feral edge Jeremiah hadn't heard before. The third man laughed, a guttural sound, and swung a chain at Jeremiah, still trapped in the cab. It caught his shoulder, the links biting through his jacket, and he cried out, blood seeping warm against his skin. "That's for the flight, punk!" the man shouted, raising the chain again. But Nadia lunged, tasing him mid-swing, his body jerking as he collapsed beside his partner. The driver bolted from the cab, screaming for help as horns blared from stalled cars, bystanders filming with shaky phones. Jeremiah kicked the door open, tumbling onto the pavement, his portfolio skidding across the asphalt. The first man, recovered, charged him, fists flying, and landed a punch to his jaw, snapping his head back. Pain exploded, stars bursting in, his vision, but he stumbled upright, swinging wildly, his knuckles grazing the man's mask. "You don't scare me," he spat, blood trickling from his lip, his defiance a fire that burned through the fear. Nadia tackled the man from behind, her taser spent but her fury alive, pinning him until he wheezed for air. Sirens wailed in the distance, red and blue lights flashing as two cop cars screeched around the corner. The attackers froze, then bolted for their truck, but the third man tripped, sprawling as officers swarmed. "Hands up!" a cop yelled, cuffing him while the others peeled away, the truck's tires smoking as it vanished into the night. Jeremiah leaned against the cab, his chest heaving, his suit shredded, blood staining his shirt from the chain's bite. Nadia pulled him close, her hands shaking as she checked his face, her satchel abandoned on the ground. "You okay?" she asked, her voice cracking, the steel giving way to a mother's fear. He nodded, wincing, his jaw throbbing. "Yeah, thanks to you." Dr. Grayson retrieved his portfolio, her blazer torn, glass dust in her hair. "That was Victor's crew," she said, her voice grim. "The bounty's real." The cops approached, their faces hard, and Jeremiah tensed, the LAX cuffs flashing in his mind. "What happened here?" the lead officer demanded, a wiry man with a buzz cut. Nadia straightened, her authority snapping back. "My son was attacked. Online threats turned physical. Arrest that one and find the rest." The cop eyed Jeremiah, his gaze lingering on his bloodied suit, then barked, "You started this?" Jeremiah's stomach dropped, but Nadia stepped in, her voice ice. "He's the victim. Do your job." The cop hesitated, then cuffed the downed attacker, hauling him up as he muttered slurs under his breath. "We'll need statements," the officer said, but his tone was sour, his eyes flicking to Jeremiah with suspicion. Nadia handed over her EPA card, her stare daring him to push. "You'll get them, and you'll investigate Victor Kane. He's behind this." The cop grunted, dragging the man to the car, but his partner lingered, snapping photos of Jeremiah like evidence of guilt. The crowd dispersed, phones still rolling, the attack already hitting social media, Victor's blog claiming credit. Justice served, more to come. Nadia guided Jeremiah to a bench, her arm around him as Dr. Grayson collected their scattered belongings. "We're suing for everything," she said, her glasses fogged with sweat. "This stops now." Jeremiah nodded, his bloodied lips stinging, his shoulder pulsing with pain. The cops drove off, the attacker in tow, but the second car lingered, the officer watching them with a smirk before pulling away. Nadia's phone buzzed, Carl's voice crackling through. Got the summit footage to the board. They're reviewing, but this attack changes things. Stay safe. She hung up, her eyes meeting Jeremiah's, a vow unspoken between them. He'd survived the flight, the summit, and now this, his body bruised, but his spirit unbowed. The hotel loomed ahead as they flagged another cab, the city's lights a cold witness to their fight. Victor's war had spilled into the streets, his bounty a call to blood, and Jeremiah's triumph over the ambush felt hollow, the next blow already lurking in the shadows. Hey folks, what's your take? Comment. Number 1, if you think Nadia's taser skills stole the show, or number 2 if Jeremiah's grit against those thugs has you cheering. Like this if you're raging at Victor's relentless hate, and subscribe to see how this family fights back. Can a mother's fury outmatch a racist's vendetta? Will the cops actually help, or are they just another trap? What's Victor cooking up next to break Jeremiah for good? The Los Angeles hotel suite smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee as Jeremiah Cole sat on a stiff couch, his black suit swapped for a hoodie and jeans, the bruises from the street ambush blooming purple across his jaw and shoulder. A bandage clung to his lip, the chain's bite on his arm wrapped in gauze. But his leather portfolio lay open on the table, its pages a testament to his unbroken spirit. Nadia Cole paced the room, her navy pantsuit rumpled from the day's battles, her coiled hair slipping from its bun as she spoke into her phone, her voice a blade of authority. Carl, we've got witnesses, footage, everything. File against Victor Kane and the Airline now. I want them crushed. Dr. Lena Grayson sat across from Jeremiah, her blazer patched at the elbow from the attack, her legal pad scribbled with notes as she reviewed the teenage girl's summit video on her laptop, the proof of Victor's frame-up crisp and damning. Jeremiah rubbed his sore jaw, his burned thighs a dull throb beneath his jeans, the memory of the masked men's fists still raw. They're not stopping, he said, his voice low, the weight of Victor's bounty. Wanted disruptive thug, $5,000 for justice, pressing on him like a storm cloud. Nadia hung up, her fierce brown eyes locking onto his. They'll stop when we make them, she said, dropping her satchel on the table. Carl's got the LA attack footage from bystanders. The summit board's reviewing your project remotely. We're fighting on all fronts. Dr. Grayson nodded, her glasses glinting with resolve. The airline's liable for Sandra and Tim's lies. Victor's the ringleader. We've got him. The next morning, Nadia drove them to a sleek courthouse downtown, her rental car cutting through LA's sprawl, the city's glass towers indifferent to their war. Jeremiah's fresh suit, a navy one Nadia had bought overnight, fit him like armor, his portfolio tucked under his arm as they entered a wood-paneled courtroom. Carl Ruiz met them, his cheap suit wrinkled, but his eyes sharp, a stack of files in hand. We're suing for defamation, assault, and emotional distress, he said, adjusting his tie. Airline's on the hook for crew misconduct. Victor's facing conspiracy charges. The judge, a stern woman with a gray bob, called the session to order, her gavel a sharp crack that silenced the room's hum. Nadia took the stand first, her voice steady as she recounted the flight. Sandra's sneers, Tim's coffee spill, Victor's planted knife, her EPA credentials lending weight to every word. My son was targeted for his race and his potential, she said, her gaze sweeping the courtroom. They turned a flight into a vendetta. Jeremiah followed, his bruised jaw a silent witness as he spoke, his voice clear despite the ache. I just wanted to get to the summit, he said, holding up his portfolio. They lied, attacked me, tried to ruin me. He detailed the LAX cuffs, the summit sabotage, the street beating, his hands steady as he flipped to a solar diagram, proof of what they'd tried to steal. Dr. Grayson testified next, her retired engineer, gravitas unshakable, her video evidence projected for the court. Victor's sleight of hand, the real flight chaos, the summit's doctored clip debunked. The airline's lawyer, a slick man in a pinstripe suit, squirmed as Carl presented bystander footage from the LA attack, the masked men's slurs echoing through the room. Victor sat in the defendant's box, his black blazer creased, his scarred neck red with fury as witnesses. Passengers from the flight, the teenage girl with the hoodie, corroborated the frame-up. The judge's pen scratched against her notepad, her face unreadable, but the tide turned with every testimony. Sandra and Tim, subpoenaed and pale, stumbled through denials, their lies unraveling under Carl's cross-examination. "You radioed security with a false threat," he pressed, and Sandra's smirk faded, her silence damning. After hours of arguments, the judge leaned forward, her voice cutting through the tension. "This court finds Victor Kane and the airline liable. Mr. Kane orchestrated a campaign of defamation and incited violence. The airline failed to protect a passenger from its crew's misconduct. Judgment for the plaintiff, $50,000 in damages, plus legal fees." The gavel slammed, a thunderclap of victory, and Jeremiah's chest heaved, relief flooding him as Nadia gripped his hand, her pride a quiet flame. Dr. Grayson clapped his shoulder, her glasses fogging with the room's heat. "You did it, kid," she said, her grin fierce. "They're finished." Victor surged to his feet, his scarred face twisted with rage. "This ain't justice," he roared, but bailiffs wrestled him down, his shouts muffled as they dragged him out. The airline lawyer slunk away, promising an appeal, but the courtroom emptied with a buzz of triumph. Nadia pulled Jeremiah into a hug, her satchel slung over her shoulder, her voice soft. "You stood tall. I'm so proud." He nodded, the $50,000 a lifeline, his summit loss softened by the win. Dr. Grayson gathered her files, her legal pad a roadmap of their fight. "Let's get you home," she said. "Atlanta's waiting." The drive back felt lighter, LA's neon fading as they neared the hotel, Jeremiah's Navy suit a badge of resilience. He flipped through his portfolio, the solar project still alive, the remote review a flicker of hope. Nadia's phone buzzed with EPA updates, her focus split but unwavering, while Dr. Grayson hummed a tune, her spirits high. The legal blow had crushed Victor's network, the blogs reach-stalling as news of the verdict spread, and Jeremiah let himself believe the war was won, the bounty a dying echo. They parked, stepping into the cool night, the hotel's glow a promise of rest after days of battle. But as they crossed the lot, a distant wail pierced the silence. Sirens, faint but growing, a sound that twisted Jeremiah's gut. Nadia's phone rang, an Atlanta number flashing, and she answered, her face paling as a neighbor's voice crackled through. "Nadia, your house, it's gone. Fire started an hour ago. It's all ashes." Her hand trembled, the phone slipping as she turned to Jeremiah, her eyes wide with dread. "Our home," she whispered, the words a wound. Dr. Grayson grabbed her arm, steadying her, her voice sharp. "Victor?" Nadia nodded, her steel cracking as she dialed Carl, her voice rising. "Check his alibi, now!" Jeremiah's knees buckled, his portfolio hitting the pavement, pages fluttering in the night breeze. The house, his room, his sketches, his grandmother's old garden, all torched, a loss deeper than the summit's sting. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You'll pay, kid. Burned your little castle. More to come." Victor's words, a dagger from jail or beyond, his vengeance unbound by bars. Sirens neared, fire trucks racing toward Atlanta, too late to save anything. Nadia pulled him close, her satchel abandoned, her voice a vow through tears. "He won't break us." But the flames had, the legal win a hollow shell against this blow, their roots reduced to cinders. Dr. Grayson scooped up the portfolio, her glasses fogged with shock. "He's insane," she said, her voice trembling. "We'll rebuild Sue again, but this—" She trailed off, the scale of Victor's hate sinking in. Jeremiah stared at the hotel, its lights mocking their loss, his bruised jaw pulsing with every heartbeat. The $50,000 meant nothing now, his triumph ashes like his home. And Victor's reach stretched beyond the courtroom, a phantom striking from the dark. Nadia's phone buzzed again, Carl confirming Victor's call. From a burner phone, his allies still free, the arson a calculated gut punch. The cab ride to a new hotel blurred, Jeremiah silent, his navy suit a shroud as Nadia plotted with Carl, her fury a shield against grief. Dr. Grayson clutched her legal pad, her mind racing for the next move. But the war had shifted, Victor's, desperation a wildfire that consumed their lives. Jeremiah's burned thighs, his battered shoulder, his torched dreams, all fuel for a fight he hadn't chosen. The legal victory a fleeting dawn before this endless night. The new Los Angeles hotel room buzzed with tension as Jeremiah Cole sat on a narrow bed, his navy suit swapped for a borrowed t-shirt and jeans, the bruises from the street ambush darkening across his jaw and shoulder. His leather portfolio rested on a chipped desk, its pages a lifeline amid the ashes of his Atlanta home, torched by Victor Kane's vengeful hand. Nadia Cole stood by the window, her navy pantsuit creased, her coiled hair loose as she spoke into her phone, her voice sharp, with urgency. "Secretary Evans, we need support. My son's been attacked, our house burned. This is beyond legal now." Dr. Lena Grayson sat at the desk, her blazer patched, her legal pad open as she typed an email to Carl Ruiz, the lawyer fighting their case. The clock blinked 2:13 a.m., the city's distant hum a cold backdrop to their unraveling world. Jeremiah rubbed his bandaged arm, the chain's bite a dull throb beneath the gauze, his burned thighs aching from days of strain. "They're not stopping," he said, his voice low, Victor's text. "You'll pay, kid. Burned your little castle. More to come," etched in his mind. Nadia hung up, her fierce brown eyes meeting his. "They will," she said, her tone a vow. "The White House is stepping in. You're speaking at a youth conference in D.C. tomorrow. Your story's going national." Dr. Grayson looked up, her glasses glinting. "Victor's in jail, but his network's alive. This exposure could crush them." Jeremiah nodded, his chest tight, the loss of his home a wound that fueled his resolve. By dawn, a private jet whisked them to Washington, D.C., Nadia's EPA clout securing the flight, the cabin quiet as Jeremiah reviewed his solar tech notes, his portfolio battered but unbroken. Nadia sat beside him, her satchel packed with files, her voice soft. "You're not just a victim. You're a voice now." Dr. Grayson dozed across the aisle, her legal pad clutched like a shield, her faith in him unwavering. The plane touched down at Dulles, a black SUV waiting to rush them to the conference, a sprawling venue near the Capitol, its halls packed with teens, activists, and press. Jeremiah's new suit, charcoal, bought hastily in L.A., fit him snugly. His bruises hidden but his spirit bared as he stepped into the spotlight. The auditorium thrummed with energy, 500 seats filled, cameras rolling as Jeremiah took the stage, his portfolio under his arm. "I'm Jeremiah Cole," he began, his voice steady, ringing with a strength forged in fire. "I'm 13, and I've been mocked, framed, beaten, and had my home burned, all because I dared to dream big." The crowd hushed, his words a hammer striking silence. He detailed the flight, Sandra's sneers, Tim's sabotage, Victor's knife, then the summit sabotage, the street ambush, the arson, his solar project a thread through it all. "This isn't just about me," he said, clicking to a slide of his charred Atlanta street. "It's about kids like me, fighting systems that want us small." Applause erupted, fierce and unbroken, the press scribbling, the teens cheering, his story a spark igniting the room. Nadia watched from the wings, her pride a quiet flame, while Dr. Grayson sat front row, her glasses fogged with emotion. The conference director, a wiry man with a gray beard, approached Nadia, his voice low. "The president's team called. They're awarding him a medal tomorrow. He's a symbol now." She nodded, her satchel slung over her shoulder. The White House is not a balm to their wounds. Jeremiah fielded questions, his bruised jaw a testament as he explained solar equity, his poise unshaken. The crowd adored him, his name trending anew. Jeremiah fights back, drowning Victor's hate with a wave of support. He stepped off stage, his chest heaving with hope, the nation's eyes a shield he hadn't expected. But the doors crashed open. Mid-ovation, a figure bursting through, his black blazer torn, his scarred neck red with rage. Victor Kane, free and feral, charged the stage, a pistol gleaming in his hand, its barrel aimed at Jeremiah. "You little punk," he roared, his voice a thunderclap that froze the room. "Think you can ruin me?" Gasps ripped through the crowd, chairs toppling as people dove for cover, the press scrambling, cameras still rolling. Nadia lunged from the wings, her satchel swinging as she tackled Jeremiah to the floor, her body a shield over his. Dr. Grayson stood, her small frame, defiant, shouting, "Get down!" as Victor fired, the shot cracking through the air. The bullet grazed Jeremiah's arm, slicing through his charcoal sleeve, blood blooming hot and red as he cried out, pain searing through him. Secret Service agents swarmed from the back, suits crisp, guns drawn, tackling Victor mid-stride, his pistol skidding across the stage. "He's mine!" Victor screamed, thrashing as they pinned him, his scarred face twisted with hate. Nadia pulled Jeremiah behind the podium, her hands shaking as she pressed her scarf to his wound, her voice fierce. "Stay with me!" Blood stained the wood, his portfolio tumbling, pages scattering like ash as the crowd shrieked, chaos reigning. Dr. Grayson rushed over, her blazer flapping, tearing her sleeve to bind his arm, her glasses fogged with panic. The agents cuffed Victor, his shouts muffled as they dragged him out, his pistol bagged, his freedom a lie exposed. A corrupt cop, his cousin later revealed, had sprung him from jail, a final act of defiance against the verdict. Medics burst in, stretchers clattering, but Jeremiah waved them off, his voice hoarse. "I'm okay," he said, wincing as Nadia tightened the scarf, her eyes wet but unyielding. "You're not," she snapped, her mother's fear breaking through. Dr. Grayson retrieved his portfolio, her hands trembling. The summit dream a distant echo in this bloodied moment. The director knelt beside them, his beard quivering. "He's a hero," he said, his voice thick. "This goes live now." Cameras caught it all. The shot, the tackle, Jeremiah's blood on the stage, the feed cutting to newsrooms nationwide. The nation gasped. Daughter Jeremiah lives surging as millions watched, his story no longer just inspiration but a battlefield etched in crimson. Victor's arrest flashed across screens, his network crumbling under the glare. But the damage was done. Jeremiah's arm pulsing with every heartbeat, his triumph tainted by a bullet's kiss. Nadia held him close, her satchel abandoned, her voice a vow. "He's finished. We've got him." Dr. Grayson nodded, her legal pad forgotten, her faith in him a rock amid the storm. The medics insisted, guiding Jeremiah to an ambulance, his charcoal suit a ruin, his portfolio clutched like a shield. Nadia and Dr. Grayson flanked him, the crowd parting with murmurs of awe and horror, his blood a symbol they couldn't unsee. The White House call came as they rolled away, Secretary Evans's voice crackling through Nadia's phone. "He's getting that medal. Tell him we're proud." She nodded, her hand on Jeremiah's, the conference of victory stolen by Victor's gun, but his voice heard, his fight immortalized. The ambulance doors shut, the sirens wailing, and Jeremiah stared at the ceiling, his burned thighs, his bruised jaw, his shot arm a map of survival. The war's end a fragile hope against the shadows still lurking. The Washington, D.C. hospital room glowed with sterile white light as Jeremiah Cole lay in a narrow bed, his arm bandaged from Victor Kane's grazing bullet, the pain a sharp pulse beneath the gauze. His navy t-shirt clung to his chest, sweat-soaked. From the conference ordeal, his bruises a map of purple and yellow across his jaw and shoulder. His leather portfolio sat on a side table, its pages crumpled but intact, a silent witness to his fight. Nadia Cole stood by his side, her navy pantsuit creased, her coiled hair falling loose as she adjusted his pillow, her fierce brown eyes, soft with worry. Dr. Lena Grayson perched on a chair, her patched blazer draped over the back, her legal pad scribbled with notes as she typed on her laptop, chasing leads on Victor's network. The clock ticked past 9 p.m., the city's hum muffled through the thick window, a world away from the bloodied stage. Jeremiah shifted, wincing as the bandage tugged, his burned thighs aching beneath the thin blanket. "I'm okay, Mom," he said, his voice hoarse, the memory of Victor's gun flashing in his mind. "You little punk." The shot still, ringing in his ears. Nadia brushed his forehead, her hand trembling slightly. "You're not," she replied, her tone firm but cracking. But you will be. Victor's locked up. This ends here. Dr. Grayson looked up, her glasses glinting. He's in custody, no bail. His cousin suspended. Corrupt cop who freed him. The nation's watching. You're a hero, Jeremiah. He nodded, his chest tight, the White House medal a promise amid the chaos. His solar project a distant dream reborn in the spotlight. The door creaked open, a nurse wheeling in a tray of bandages and a glass of water, her smile gentle. "You've got visitors soon," she said, checking his chart. "Big ones." Nadia's phone buzzed, Secretary Evans' voice crackling through. "Nadia, the president's coming tomorrow. Medal ceremony set. Jeremiah's story's changing things." She nodded, her satchel on the floor, her pride a quiet fire. "He's ready," she said, hanging up as the nurse left, the room settling into a fragile calm. Jeremiah sipped the water, his lips stinging, the conference's roar, 500 voices cheering, then screaming, a memory that fueled him. "They heard me," he murmured, his portfolio within reach. "That's what matters." Morning broke with a flurry, the hospital buzzing as Secret Service swept the halls, their suits crisp, their earpieces humming. Jeremiah dressed in a beat new charcoal suit, its sleeves tailored to hide his bandages, his bruises fading under concealer Nadia applied with care. "You look strong," she said, adjusting his tie, her voice steadying him. Dr. Grayson arrived, her blazer swapped for a clean one, her legal pad tucked away, her presence a rock as they moved to a private room, its walls lined with flags. The president entered, tall and graying, his handshake firm as he met Jeremiah's gaze. "You've got courage, son," he said, his voice warm, familiar from TV but real now. "What you've faced, what you're building, it's the future we need." The medal gleamed, a bronze star on a blue ribbon, pinned to Jeremiah's chest as cameras flashed, Nadia and Dr. Grayson standing proud beside him. "For resilience and innovation," the president declared, the room erupting in applause, the nation watching live. Jeremiah's voice rang out, brief but clear. "This is for every kid told they don't belong," he said, his bruised jaw a testament, his portfolio a vow. The president nodded, clapping his shoulder, and the ceremony ended with a swell of hope. Victor's jail cell a distant victory, his network crumbling under federal scrutiny. Nadia hugged him, her satchel slung over her shoulder, her tears hidden but felt. "You did it," she whispered. Dr. Grayson grinned, her glasses fogging. "Told you, kid. Unbreakable." The hospital discharged him hours later, his arm still, tender but his spirit soaring, the medal a weight of honor against his chest. Nadia drove them to a secure hotel, her EPA team arranging protection, the city's monuments glowing in the dusk. Jeremiah flipped through his portfolio, the solar project alive again, funders calling after the broadcast. "They want to pilot it," he said, his voice lifting. The arson's ashes a scar he'd outgrown. Dr. Grayson nodded, her laptop open to news feeds. "Victor's done, his blog's offline, his cronies scattering. You've won." Nadia smiled, her fierce eyes, softening the war's end a fragile dawn after endless night. But as they unpacked, a shadow crept in. Dr. Grayson's phone pinged, a file from Carl Ruiz loading slow on the hospital's shaky Wi-Fi. She opened it, her face paling as an audio clip played, voices crackling through static. "Ground crews. Set!" Sandra Holt's voice hissed, her tone venomous. "Kid's name's on the list. We'll cash out when he's down." Tim Baxter's laugh followed, low and cruel. "Victor's the muscle, but we're the brains. 50 grand split 3 ways." The clip cut off, Dr. Grayson's glasses slipping as she stared at Jeremiah. "This is from the flight," she said, her voice trembling. "Sandra and Tim, they planned it all with Victor, for profit." Nadia snatched the phone, replaying it, her jaw tightening as the truth sank in. "They weren't just bigots," she said, her voice ice. "They were mercenaries." Jeremiah's stomach dropped, his metal cold against his chest, the flight's sneers now a conspiracy deeper than hate. Dr. Grayson slammed her laptop shut, her legal pad tumbling. "Carl's sending this to the feds, the airline's toast." Nadia dialed Carl, her voice rising. "Get the FAA on this. Sandra and Tim are fugitives now. The call crackled, Carl confirming the audio's leak from a whistleblower. The crew's scheme a profit-driven plot to ruin Jeremiah. Their cut tied to Victor's bounty. The hotel room spun, Jeremiah's burned thighs, his shot arm, his torched home. All pieces of a game he hadn't seen. They wanted money, he said, his voice hollow. The summit's loss a pawn in their greed. Nadia gripped his hand, her satchel abandoned, her fury a shield. They're gone. Vanished after the verdict. But we'll find them. Dr. Grayson nodded, her resolve hardening. Feds'll hunt them down. This audio's their noose. The airline issued a statement hours later, firing Sandra and Tim in absentia, their names plastered across news feeds, fugitives in a scandal that rocked the industry. Jeremiah's story swelled, Shockside flight conspiracy trending, his medal a beacon amid the wreckage. He stood by the window, DC's skyline a jagged promise, his portfolio open on the bed, the solar project a light they couldn't snuff, Victor's jail cell held, his network shattered. But Sandra and Tim's escape gnawed at him, their vow of revenge a whisper in the dark. Nadia joined him, her arm around his shoulders, her voice fierce. You're stronger than them. We'll rebuild. Dr. Grayson packed her laptop, her glasses fogged with exhaustion. They're running, but they can't hide forever. The hotel's silence was a fragile peace, the war's end a lie as long as they roamed free. Their malice, a shadow stretching beyond the bars, sharper and hungrier than Victor's gun. Jeremiah adjusted his medal, its weight a reminder of survival, his bruised jaw a badge of battles won. The nation hailed him, his voice heard, his dreams funded, but the audio's echo lingered. Sandra's hiss a promise of more pain. Nadia's phone buzzed with EPA updates, her fight unrelenting, while Dr. Grayson plotted with Carl, the feds closing in. The city slept beyond the glass, unaware of the fugitives plotting in its shadows, their greed a blade poised to strike again, the final stand of victory teetering on the edge of a deeper abyss. The Washington, D.C. hotel suite shimmered with morning light as Jeremiah Cole stood by a full-length mirror, adjusting the crisp collar of a new charcoal suit, its fit perfect against his lean frame, the bruises from his ordeal fading to faint, shadows on his jaw and shoulder. His leather portfolio sat on a polished desk, its pages smoothed and rebound. The solar tech project now funded by a coalition of green tech firms, spurred by his White House medal and national fame. Nadia Cole lounged on a plush sofa, her navy pantsuit pristine, her coiled hair swept into a neat bun, a cup of coffee steaming in her hand as she scrolled through EPA emails on her tablet, her fierce brown eyes glinting with pride. Dr. Lena. Grayson packed her patched blazer into a suitcase, her legal pad tucked away, her glasses perched on her nose as she hummed a tune. The war's end a quiet victory after months of chaos. Jeremiah rubbed his bandaged arm, the bullet graze a dull ache beneath the gauze. His burned thighs healed into faint scars, the chains bite a memory stitched into his resilience. Feels like a new start, he said, his voice steady. The weight of Victor Kane's jail cell, Sandra Holt's fugitive status and Tim Baxter's disappearance lifting with every passing day. Nadia set her tablet down, her smile warm. You earned it, she replied, rising to adjust his tie, her hand steady. Atlanta's rebuilding. The house will be better than before. Your project's live. Dr. Grayson zipped her bag, her grin sharp. Feds are closing in on Sandra and Tim. They're ghosts, but not for long. You're untouchable now. The past months had been a whirlwind. Victor's conviction cemented, his network dismantled by federal raids. The airline, fined millions after Carl Ruiz's lawsuit. The audio of Sandra and Tim's profit scheme a noose tightening around their absence. Jeremiah's conference speech had sparked a movement. Jeremiah lives a rallying cry, his solar grids breaking ground in Atlanta's poorest corners, funded by $50,000 in damages and a flood of donations. The White House medal, hung framed on the wall, its bronze star a beacon of his rise, the nation's applause a shield against the shadows. Today, they'd fly home, a commercial jet booked under tight security, Nadia's EPA cloud ensuring a smooth ride after the hell of Flight 217. They rolled through DC's streets in a black SUV, Secret Service trailing discreetly. The airport, a bustle of travelers unaware of the boy in the charcoal suit who'd reshaped headlines. Jeremiah clutched his portfolio, his chest light. The summit loss, the street ambush, the arson. All battles won. His voice heard beyond the chaos. Nadia checked her phone, her satchel slung over her shoulder, her voice calm. "Flight's on. Time. We're in first class again, no surprises this time." Dr. Grayson chuckled, her glasses fogging with the car's heat. Famous last words, she teased, but her faith in their triumph was unshaken. The terminal loomed, its glass doors sliding open, and they boarded with ease, security nodding as Nadia flashed her credentials, the past a ghost they'd buried. The first-class cabin gleamed, its leather seats a stark contrast to the nightmare of months ago, the hum of the engines a soothing drone as Jeremiah settled into seat 3A, Nadia beside him in 3B, Dr. Grayson across the aisle in 4A. Passengers filed in, their glances curious but kind, some whispering his name with awe, the metal's shine a quiet fame. A new flight attendant approached, her auburn hair pinned tight, her name tag reading Lisa. "Welcome aboard," she said, her smile polite, her green eyes flicking over Jeremiah with a flicker he couldn't place. "Anything you need, just ask." Nadia nodded, her satchel stowed, her tone light. "Water for now, thanks." Lisa moved off, her steps smooth, and Jeremiah opened his portfolio, tracing a solar grid sketch, the flight a bridge to home. Takeoff was seamless, the plane climbing through DC's gray sky, the seatbelt sign chiming off as the cabin settled into a gentle rhythm. Jeremiah leaned back, his bandaged arm resting easy, the charcoal suit a badge of his rise, the war's scars a strength he wore proudly. Nadia pulled out her tablet, drafting a memo, her coffee replaced by a glass of water, while Dr. Grayson flipped through a science journal, her glasses slipping with the plane's slight sway. "Smooth so far," she murmured, her voice a balm, and Jeremiah nodded, his chest loosening. The summit, the conference, the bullet, all fading into a past he'd conquered. Then Lisa returned, her auburn hair catching the light, her smile tighter now, a glint in her green eyes that prickled Jeremiah's spine. "Back for more, huh?" she said, her voice low, aimed at him like a dart, her polite mask slipping into something sharper. He froze, his portfolio slipping slightly, her words an echo of Sandra's sneer, a ghost from Flight 217. Nadia's head snapped up, her tablet clattering to the tray, her fierce eyes narrowing. "What did you say?" she demanded, her tone ice, her hand gripping the armrest. Lisa smirked, stepping back, her voice louder now. "Just joking, ma'am. Relax." But the smirk lingered, a blade unsheathed, and Dr. Grayson's journal hit the floor, her glasses fogging as she stared. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice sharp, suspicion coiling in the air. The cabin hushed, passengers glancing over, the tension a sudden pulse in the quiet flight. Lisa turned away, her heels clicking toward the galley, but Jeremiah's gut twisted, his triumph cracking under her gaze. "She knows me," he whispered, his bandaged arm tensing, the metal's weight cold against his chest. Nadia grabbed her phone, dialing security's ground line, her voice low. "Check the crew list, now." The call dropped, the signal fading, at 30,000 feet, and she cursed, her satchel spilling pens as she stood. Dr. Grayson followed, her small frame bristling. "That's no coincidence," she said, her eyes darting to the galley curtain, Lisa's shadow moving beyond it. Minutes later, the plane jolted, a sharp lurch that rattled the overhead bins, the seatbelt sign flashing on with a chime. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, calm but clipped. "Folks, minor turbulence, stay seated." But the jolt came again, harder, and Jeremiah's water glass slid, splashing across his portfolio, his pages soaking as he grabbed them. Nadia's eyes widened, her hand on his shoulder, her voice fierce. "Something's wrong." Dr. Grayson unbuckled, defying the sign, and strode to the galley, her glasses glinting with fury. "What's happening?" she demanded, yanking the curtain aside, but Lisa blocked her, her smirk gone, her green eyes cold. "Sit down, lady," she snapped, her hand on a radio, its static hissing. The plane banked suddenly, a steep turn that tilted the cabin, passengers gasping as bags tumbled from seats. Jeremiah clutched his portfolio, his bandaged arm throbbing, his burned thighs tensing against the seat. Nadia's phone buzzed, a text from Carl slipping through. "Sandra's sister, Lisa Holt. Tim's flying. Be careful." Her face paled, her satchel hitting the floor as she stood, her voice a roar. "They've hijacked it!" Dr. Grayson spun, her glasses slipping, her voice cutting through the panic. "Lock the cabin!" But Lisa moved faster, slamming a button on the galley wall. The first-class door sealing with a thud, trapping them inside, her smirk returning like a venomous bloom. The intercom crackled again. Tim Baxter's voice now, a low growl that chilled Jeremiah's blood. "This is your new captain. We've got a score to settle. Ransom's 10 million or the kid's done." Passengers screamed, the cabin a chaos of fear, and Lisa loomed over Jeremiah, her auburn hair a curtain as she leaned close. "Sandra says hi," she hissed, her hand gripping a knife, its blade glinting in the dim light. Nadia lunged, her taser from LA gone, her fists swinging, but Lisa dodged, shoving her back with a laugh. Dr. Grayson grabbed a tray, swinging it at Lisa's head, the metal clanging as it grazed her, blood trickling from her temple. Jeremiah's mind raced, his portfolio soaked, his metal a useless shield as the plane dipped, the altitude dropping fast. "We're not crashing," he muttered, his voice steady, his tech brain kicking in. He ripped open his backpack, pulling a laptop he'd packed for summit revisions, its battery glowing as he hacked the plane's Wi-Fi, his fingers flying over keys. "Override the controls," he said, his burned thighs forgotten, his shot arm screaming as he typed, Nadia shielding him, Dr. Grayson wrestling Lisa for the knife. The screen flashed, codes scrolling, and the plane leveled, a forced landing, signal pinging ground crews below. Engines whined, the descent sharp but controlled, and Lisa froze, her knife trembling as sirens wailed faintly through the hull, emergency teams locking onto their signal. The cabin door burst open, agents storming, and as the plane touched down, a rough skid on a rural airstrip, dust billowing outside. Lisa dropped the knife, her auburn hair wild, her voice a snarl. "This isn't over," she spat, agents cuffing her as Tim's shouts echoed from the cockpit. His reign ended. Jeremiah slumped, his laptop smoking, his portfolio drenched, his blood seeping through the bandage anew, the metal dangling loose. Nadia pulled him close, her satchel lost, her voice a vow. "You saved us," she whispered, her tears hot against his cheek. Dr. Grayson sank to her seat, her glasses cracked, her breath ragged. "Brilliant kid," she rasped, the agents dragging Lisa away, Tim subdued in the distance. The plane stilled, rescue lights flashing outside, but Lisa's words lingered, a shadow uncaught. The war's end a lie as the cycle reset, darker, deadlier, a fight without a finish. Jeremiah Cole's journey and crew laughs at black boy in suit flying first class. Mom's phone rings, hello, White House speaking, is a raw testament to resilience against systemic racism and personal vendettas. The first lesson is the power of unyielding determination. Jeremiah faced mockery, physical attacks, and sabotage, yet his intellect and grit turned every setback into a stepping stone, from hacking a plane to winning a national medal. His story teaches us that adversity doesn't define you, your response does. Second, the strength of community shines through. Nadia's fierce protection, Dr. Grayson's unwavering support, and even strangers' footage flipped the narrative, proving collective action can dismantle lies. It's a reminder that allies matter in the fight for justice. Third, the tale exposes the persistence of prejudice. Victor, Sandra, and Tim's escalating malice, fueled by racism and greed, shows how deep bias runs, even in victory's shadow. It's a call to stay vigilant, as hatred doesn't surrender easily. Finally, Jeremiah's voice, amplified from a flight to the White House, underscores the impact of speaking out. Silence lets injustice win, but courage changes the game. For every reader or viewer, this story urges action. Stand up, support others, and challenge the status quo. What's your takeaway? Comment below. Did Jeremiah's resilience inspire you, or did the villain's persistence shock you? Hit like if you believe in fighting back, subscribe for more tales of grit, and share to spark this conversation wider. Thanks for joining us on this wild ride. May you find strength to face your own battles and wisdom to lift others up along the way.